NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
I am just really so very honored right now to be on the same platform and moderating this panel of very illustrious authors who have memoirs and autobiographical accounts dealing with criminal justice related themes. And it's so very important because laws and policies change when the issues are humanized. And the number one way that you really go about humanizing the issues is telling your stories, telling the personal stories. That's really, really the underlying reason for many of the changes that did happen, particularly during the Obama administration and before, since the passage of that horrendous crime bill of 1994. And it really was those personal stories from people with lived experiences, not just academicians and not just the policy wonks, etc., but the people actually who were and are the most impacted. So I'm really honored to have several of them with us right here this morning. And I'm going to just start off with Susan Burton. I'm just doing some brief introductions. The full introductions are in your packets. So please be sure to review them. And the way we're going to proceed this morning, I'm going to do brief introductions, and then I'm going to allow the panelists to share about 7 to 10 minutes, share what led them to be an impacted person, and they might want to share that through reading portions of their book. They might want to share that through, discussion with us, but I want them to share. And then the second part, what we would do is talk about what you're doing now. What is the impact of your experiences with respect to what you're doing now post conviction, life post-incarceration, shall we say. And then we're going to leave time for Q&A so that we can have some interaction between the audience as well. So, Susan, the epitome of someone with a lived experience from just a very, very young age, whether we're talking about being impacted by sexual abuse, being impacted by substance abuse, being impacted by depression, whether being impacted by trauma. She really has faced it all, but it's really come out on the other side, just doing absolutely phenomenal things. In fact, she's been called the Harriet Tubman, going back time after time after time to bring other people from enslavement, i.e. prison industrial complex, shall we say, to where we are now. And her book is called Becoming Miss Burton: From Prison to Recovery to Leading the Fight for Incarcerated Women. I want to add that all of these books are available outside, and really urge you to go out there and go on and purchase them, and purchase them from some of your loved ones as well. So greetings, Susan. We also have Anthony Graves, and I just was very pleased and thrilled. Actually, we had Susan Burton also to come to Washington to be part of the Justice Roundtable, which is a coalition which I convened, and for him to share his story. Anthony Graves, we talk about, y'all know everybody in prison innocent, but Anthony was absolutely innocent and exonerated. In fact, he became known as U.S. Death Row Exoneree number 138. And I think, were you the 12th exoneree? I forgot where I got that.
Yeah. I was 138 around the country, 12th in Texas.
That's it, 138 around the country, 12th in Texas. And in fact, Anthony was the one, through his work, primarily responsible for the 13th exoneree, mainly, through his work. He is a consultant for the ACLU of Texas as part of their Smart Justice initiatives, scenario. He has his own foundation which focuses on getting innocent people out of prison, and his book is called Infinite Hope: How Wrongful Conviction, Solitary Confinement, and 12 Years on Death Row failed to kill my soul. And every time I see that title, Anthony, I swear to God, I think about 12 Years a Slave. I don't know, but because again, this whole dichotomy and connection between imprisonment and enslavement. Brian Seaman talks about this. Slavery did not change; it simply evolved, to what we see today. And we have Omar Howard. Wow, we're talking about the epitome of someone who went in at a very young age and now goes back time and time again to be a powerful motivator and mentor to young people, other people looking for what is the right choice to make. He is the founder of Freedom is a Choice Incorporated, and uses his previous incarceration as a tool for counseling and mentoring at-risk youth and troubled adults. And it was his experience in prison, becoming involved with prison ministry and chaplains and the like, which really helped to set him on the right course. And his book is called The Omar Howard Story, The Omar Howard Story. And, 15 years, every time I look at these lengthy periods of incarceration, it really shows how much the United States is an outlier, particularly amongst other nations in the world with respect to incarceration. And then last but not least, and he might be here in absentia, not sure, he was here with us last night, and he is the honorary co-chair of this eliminating shackling, shackles from incarceration, collateral consequences. It's Mike Epps. We're talking about comedian extraordinaire. And someone said to me, what Mike Epps, what is he on this panel dealing with authors with lived experience? Well, he has lived experience. And his book is called Unsuccessful Thug. Wow, I love that. Because if he'd been successful, maybe he might not be out here now to be filming and touring the country and performing and, all the things that he's done, all the wonderful movies, Friday and Hancock and, the honeymoon, it just goes on and on. So with that, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start with Susan, about 7 to 10 minutes to just share about what happened, okay? What was life like, okay? We're talking about pre and during incarceration. And then when we come back for our second round, we're going to talk about the impact that you're making today.
Thank you so much, Nkechi, and I want to thank the conference for having us all here. And I'm honored to be here with Anthony and Omar and Mike if he comes. And even if he don't come, his name is up here, and I'm like, yeah, Mike Epps, it's funny. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing year after year, decade after decade. I appreciate it, much appreciated. So, what happened? I guess the better question would be, what didn't happen? While writing the book, I went back through my life to actually capture everything that happened, and it was so much that happened. My earliest memory I write about in the book is getting in the car with my mom and my auntie to go and pick up her boyfriend, her crazy boyfriend, at the mental hospital. And riding down that long lane, counting the palm trees, while I'm trying to disappear in the backseat of the car, because I know when I get to palm tree number 22, that crazy man is going to walk out of that mental hospital and he's going to do something to me over the weekend that I don't know how to express. I don't know how to explain, but I know inside of me that there's something going on wrong. And those experiences happened time and time again, and it led to the point that as a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old girl child, I learned how to navigate trauma. That I was skilled at it. This is what I had to do, and I did it. I did it good. I survived all of that, and then my son, KK, his name was Mark K. We called him KK, 5 years old, was killed by LAPD detective. And at that point, I could no longer negotiate or navigate trauma. My world, the bottom of my world fell out, and I spun into this bliss of darkness that I used alcohol. I drank alcoholically. It escalated to drug use. It was the early 80s. It was everywhere, and I consumed it. What I want you to know is that drugs ascended into our communities like locusts on crops, and it devastated us. And there should have been, and there could have been something different beside police and prisons and jails. So I was arrested for the drug use. I got caught up in the criminal justice system for over 20 years. I cycled in and out, always under the authority of the California Department of Corrections, until someone helped me. So that is the second half of the story. That's what we'll come back to. But there could have been, and there should have been something different in our communities. And my work now is to build that something different, not only in my community, but on a national scale. So we'll talk about that.
So,
Thank you.
Susan, can you just speak a little bit more about your experiences inside, or some of the women that you encountered, or even, I don't know what conscious or non-conscious you were back in those days, but in terms of, did you sense any sense of unfairness in terms of the type of sentences that women were getting?
Again, our communities was devastated by the use of incarceration, i.e. slavery. I sat with women, and still I see women that are so gifted, so incredibly talented. And I'm not just saying that men aren't, but women is who I work with, and where my work lies, and just incredible women. And I'm gonna just defer right now to April. Would you stand, April? So April was in prison for 27 years, and she's been home a year now. So she is the CEO, I guess, of Blue Ink Consulting, and she's doing corrections consulting. And she's just incredibly smart. And she was taken from our community for years and years and years. There's a woman right now in Alabama, in Tutwiler Prison. Her name is Geneva Cooley. She's serving 999 years, 99 months, 99 days for a drug charge. She's 71 years old, and she's been there 17 years. And I went last month to see her. She was talking about organizing the kitchen workers because they go in there and they get all of these rashes behind the conditions. And I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. She's 71 years old. She talking about organizing the kitchen workers to not go to work. And I'm like, that's the spirit I'm talking about. 71 years old, 17 years. So much I see taken and stolen from our communities. So much smart, hard, long sentences that just shouldn't be, but is.
Okay, thank you so very much, Susan. So I'm going to turn now to Anthony and tell us a little bit about your lived experience. What led you down that particular path, and if you want to share anything from your book.
Yeah, I want to share something from my book. I talk too much, so you might want me to read my book. But, this happened to me when I was 26 years old. I was at home with my family, and a crime had happened in a town that I don't even go to. Didn't know the family that got murdered. And they picked this young man up who was at the funeral and had burns on his body. Texas Rangers were there. So I'm from Houston, Texas. Texas Rangers was there and noticed that and wanted to talk to him. He agreed. They followed him home, took him to DPS office where they started to interrogate him. The moment they started to interrogate him is the moment my life changed. This young man, I don't even know him, but he was married to a cousin of mine that I grew up with. But we really didn't know each other because as you get older, you separate. But this young man who was in the custody of the Texas Rangers was also the father of one of the children that was murdered in this fire. And they was telling him that they thought he did it because he had burns on him. But that wasn't enough for them. They wanted someone else. And they told him that if he just called the name of someone else, they would let him go. According to this young man, he thought he had seen me in a Jeep earlier on his way to the DPS office. So when they continued to press him for another name, he called mine. He said he called it because he knew I hadn't done anything, but yet they would let him go. Well, that's not how the system worked, right? Because once he called my name, they turned around and arrested him and charged him with capital murder. And then a couple of hours, they knocked on my door. It was my neighbor. He knocked on my door to tell me that the police was looking for me. And I'm asking him, what the police looking for me for? He said, I don't know, man, but they asked us that your vehicle. So better yet, I decided I'm going to go look for the police because I want to know why the police looking for me. I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm going to go look for the police, right? Now, this is the part where I like to tell everyone that if you hear nothing else what I say, at least hear this. Don't ever go look for the police. I'm going to tell you that right now, right? Let them come find you, okay? They get paid for that. Because I went looking for the police and my whole life changed. I walked downstairs, the officer pulled up. I stopped, he get out the vehicle, and he asked me my name, and I tell him, and he asked me for some ID, and I show it to him. And he's looking at me, and he has this perplexed look on his face because he see I'm not nervous, I'm not running, I'm cooperating. And he said, I've been told to come pick you up, take you downtown, some officers want to talk to you. And I said, for what? He said, well, I can't tell you, but when you get there, they'll tell you. So anyway, he takes me downtown. They took me into the booking room. I'm sitting there 20, 30 minutes, nobody saying nothing to me, I'm just sitting there. And finally, I started asking the officers that were coming in and out, hey man, can somebody tell me why I'm here? So hold on, some officers are coming, they're gonna talk to you, okay? 10, 15 minutes later, 4 Texas Rangers and a magistrate walks in and asked me to stand up, asked me my name, of course I stood up, and they began reading me my rights. So I'm standing here and I'm listening to them read me my rights, but I don't know where this is going. I'm thinking, I have a ticket out, that's as far as I could go. Do I have a ticket out? But I know I hadn't been pulled over for no ticket. I ain't let nobody borrow my car, get a ticket, so I don't know where this is going. And then they finally tell me you've been charged with capital murder and you have no bond. And my whole life changed. Make a long story short, I sit in jail 2.5 years waiting trial. I kept asking them to take me to trial because I believed in our criminal justice system. And I knew I hadn't done anything. So I just need to get to trial and I can go home. I'm telling you, it don't work like that. It really don't work like that. I didn't see one player on the state side seeking the truth. I seen them seeking a conviction. And I'm sitting here. I'm having an out-of-body experience. And after 2.5 years of sitting in jail, we have trial. And during the first trial, we had voir dire. And I asked, that's called picking of the jury. And I'm sitting at a table like this in front of all the jurors. And each one would come up, my attorney would ask them, hey, well, how you feel about my client, Mr. Gray, sitting here? And at least 7 out of 10 of them would say, he must have done something, otherwise you wouldn't have him here. They became the jury of my peers. And I'm sure this probably not gonna surprise you all, but they did not look like me, okay? They did not grow up in my neighborhood, but they was the jury of my peers. And they ended up convicting me on no evidence. 2 other jurors said they never believed Anthony Graves was guilty, but they convicted him anyway because he didn't have good attorneys. And they felt like once they convicted me, that I would get an automatic new trial and I can get new attorneys. That's the mind of the juror. So what did that say? The ones that are in there making the most important decision are the most uninformed. That is a problem in our criminal justice system. I ended up being convicted and sentenced to death, okay? I was sentenced to death. I had 2 execution dates while I was down there. I witnessed over 413 men and women getting murdered around me by the state. I witnessed men hanging themselves. I witnessed men cutting their throats, all trying to check out because of the conditions that they was existing under, not living. All right. So I just like to share just a part of my book with you for a second. All right. And I think this is about execution date. It said the next 6 years was spent coping as best as I could, while men I knew on the road were killed year after year, sometimes with alarming efficiency. The officers at the terror unit were going to be challenged to get along with at first because they hadn't worked around us, so they didn't know us at all. That's because we had been moved to this unit. They didn't know us at all. They were told that we were all very dangerous, and they had to be careful when walking by our cells on the runs. I heard one black female officer tell her white coworker, whom she thought was walking too close, say, you know they told us not to walk too close to their cells? I could only shake my head. She sounded totally brainwashed by a government system built to kill people. I knew then that this transition to the terror unit was going to take some time getting used to. As time went by, however, inmates and officers developed relationships that helped to de-escalate the tension and fear. Over time, the routine of living on death row at the terror unit started to remind me of the same environment as LS1 unit. Officers began bringing in contraband, and flirting had started taking place between inmates and female officers. I learned that no matter what circumstances are, men and women are attracted to one another, even in these surreal environments. Familiarity breeds not only contempt, as the saying goes, but also inevitable sexual tension between men and women. The state of Texas was still executing people at a shocking rate despite controversies in many cases. Odell Barnes Jr. was executed in 2000. A few months after, we made it to the terror unit. An African-American man from Wichita Falls, Texas. He had done construction work before coming to death row. He was born in 1968, and at 23 years old, and with an 11th grade education, he had been sentenced to death. He'd been charged once for robbery and placed on shock probation. And then in 1989, he was convicted of robbery and murder of a woman who was beaten with a lamp and rifle, stabbed in the neck and shot in the head. Her naked body was found on her bed, where she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. A .32 caliber handgun and an indeterminate amount of money was stolen from the home. It was said that Barnes was later observed trying to sell the gun to different people. The only thing was, Barnes said he didn't do it. He claimed to have had a sexual relationship with this woman, a consensual relationship with this woman. His case picked up some headlines in Europe. Attorneys started investigating and felt that they had done everything they could to prove his innocence. But the state wasn't going to listen. Odell Barnes Jr. was executed in 2000. His last words on the gurney, and I'll finish with this. I'd like to send great love to all my family members, my supporters, and my attorneys. They have all supported me throughout this. I thank you for proving my innocence, although it has not been acknowledged by the courts. May you continue in the struggle, and may you change all that's being done here today and in the past. Life has not been good to me, but I believe that now, after meeting so many people who supported me in this, that all things will come to an end, and may this be the fruit of better judgments for the future. That's all I have to say.
Wow.
That was my experience with the criminal justice system. And as we continue throughout this panel discussion, you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony Graves. Let's hear now about the Omar Howard story. Talk to us.
First of all, good morning. I just want to make sure we was all woke. Seems like everybody's quiet right now, but I asked that because I'm excited about life. I don't know about everybody else. I'm excited every day that I can wake up and breathe, and because I realize where I come from and what I've been through. My book's called Omar Howard Story, and actually there's a revised version coming out in a few months called it's all Omar Howard Story. It's all in the name. Tell you a little bit about my life. Grew up in Auburn, Alabama. Poor environment. Stayed on a dirt road. Stayed by neighbors. Had an outhouse. Grandfather was on a farm. So I grew up in a not modernized world, but a world full of love, because that's what my grandmother showed me. She definitely showed me a lot of love. She definitely showed me to have some respect and do all these great things and have dreams. And that's what I had. I had dreams of doing something with my life. Even though I didn't meet my father, my mother moved up to Georgia, and I stayed with my grandmother for like 10 years. And I was so excited to move up to Atlanta. You heard all the great things about Atlanta. My mother moved up here so she can have a better life, because she didn't want to raise me, I guess, in Alabama. She wanted a better and a more creative life than what my grandparents had. So moving up to Alabama, from Alabama, after going through so much turmoil. When I say turmoil, my granddaddy, he was a drunk. He drank all the time. My uncles, they drank. They was on drugs. My aunts, a few of my aunts, they was on drugs. So my mother wanted to pull me away from that part. But I was happy to move up there because there was some secrets and some things that had happened to me that I didn't want to share with my family. So by moving up my mom, I was able to escape some of the dark secrets that I didn't want to share. And one of those secrets was, one of the friends of the family tried to molest me. And thank God, I did all I could to try to avoid him. And I knew at that age, at 3, 4, 5, something like that, I knew to run and try to escape from him, but I was scared to tell my family, not realizing that was going to have some type of effect on me as I got older, because it made me not trust people. But my uncles and cousins, being I was the only child from my mom, my uncle, my cousin was my biggest influence. And while I was in Alabama, they taught me a lot of crazy things as far as stealing and breaking the houses. And there was a little game room up the street, and we used to break into video games, and we used to do all this crazy stuff. And they taught me sex at an early age with a young girl that was a neighbor at like 4 years old. Like, they were just really planting some real negative seeds in my life. And so moving from Alabama to Georgia should have been a release valve, should have been, a great opportunity. But when my mother moved up here, she allowed some of my aunts and uncles to move up here with me. And my mother stayed with her boyfriend while I stayed at the apartment and went to school, not knowing that the same thing we was running from had just moved up here with us. So we moved up here, and like I said, I went to started going to school, started being inspired about life, wanted to go to college, wanted to play basketball, and went to 8th grade, man, and I was excited. Started playing basketball, had A's and B's, and my mother, she was a single mom, and she was doing okay, but she couldn't afford. As we get up to Alabama and Georgia was two different places. Alabama, people didn't really care about clothes, didn't care how you necessarily look. Everybody around us was kind of, some people had a little more money than others, but people wasn't caught up in the fashion stuff. But when I moved up here, things were moving a little bit faster, and so I wanted to catch up with the crowd. And when I got caught up, tried to catch up with the crowd, that late 80s when the drug game had hit real hard, my eyes caught a glimpse of it. And being that my cousins and uncles taught me a certain lifestyle, and me not having no one to push me or mentor me or, speak life into me once I became a teenager, it was so easy for me to gravitate to people who was doing the same thing my uncles and cousins was doing. So I began to test the drug game out, and started selling drugs. And for a moment, it was cool. And then, at that time, I was 13 years old. I was still scared of my mom. So when my mom heard about it, made a threat, I tried to stop, because I was like, man, my mom don't play, boy. She put the beat down on you. So I'm gonna go ahead and just chill out. But as I began to get a little bit taller than my mom, I started, being less scared of who my mom was. So I started selling drugs. And eighth grade, as I was telling you, I was A and B student. We get to the summertime, I'm selling a little more drugs, and by the time I get to the ninth grade, first semester, I dropped out of school because I got that drawn away from life and from having the reality of knowing that I could do something better with my life just over a summertime. So I started selling drugs, and I dropped out of school, and not only did I drop out of school, I started getting a real bad attitude. I started embracing that street life. I didn't grow up no hard kid. I grew up kind of, fairly good kid to the most part, besides the stuff I was doing with my uncle and them. But my uncle, my mom, my grandmother, they taught me how to be respectful. But the more I embraced that street, the more I became that street life person. So I started being very disrespectful. Started losing, any type of, respect for authority. So I went from one thing to another. I went from selling drugs to breaking a car, breaking a house. Eventually, I started robbing. Started hanging with guys that rob. And when I picked up that gun for the first time, I'll never forget, somebody told me, they said, Omar, you picking up that gun, man, you picking up trouble. And I'm listening to it, but for me at that time in life, I'm listening to NWA, I'm listening to the Ghetto Boys, I'm listening to all this music, and, some of the guys that were around me from certain parts of here in Atlanta, these guys already had a reputation of selling drugs, robbing, some of them had murder charges that they had already beat. But I thought at the time of my life, I thought that was cool because I was embracing that. And then I began to have this lifestyle that I chose to, to live. And so I started kicking in doors, I started robbing, so I'm living this gangster life that I thought was cool, and then one thing led to another. I eventually called my first charge at 15 for robbery. The second charge I called was terroristic threat, tried to fight the police off. Third call was a pistol charge. And fourth was attempted robbery or something like that. I didn't realize the time in my life, man, all the choices I was making, man, was sending me down a spiral path. But at that point in your life, you don't think you're going to get caught. And there came a time right at when I turned 17, I had my first son, that something hit me, and it said, and I thought about the life that I lived without a father, because that was real critical in my life. I really wanted a father in my life. I really wanted to have a big brother. I really wanted something more than what I was giving myself for a time being. I remember getting my first job, and I said, you know what, I'm through with the streets. Having a baby, and comes with, you see all the cute things that we do, we dress them up and all that. I didn't realize how serious life was when you had to start buying Similac and diapers. And getting my first job at McDonald's and putting 2 weeks in the hole, and then waiting another 2 weeks to get a check. And I wasn't used to that life. I wasn't used to that slow money. And I never forget, my son's mother said, man, you got to get some money, man. This here ain't going fast enough. And I went back in the streets. And this was December 1992 when I started back hustling and robbing and stuff. And February 5th, going into 1993, 18 years old, I found myself in the DeKalb County Jail, charged with 13 major felons. I was charged with murder, felony murder, 3 counts of armed robbery, 3 counts of false imprisonment, 3 counts of aggravated assault, burglary, and carrying a concealed weapon. And I'll never forget, man, when that door slammed behind my back, man, all I could say, man, how the hell I got myself in this situation? Because for that moment, it's like life came back to me, and I was in a daze. And I never forget calling my mom that night, and she started crying. I just said, Mom, I'm not coming home this time. And at the moment of my life, as I called some of my friends, because the murder actually wasn't mine, I was just part of a murder or armed robbery that went wrong. But when everybody turned their back on me, everybody told me, don't call my phone no more, and all this stuff, especially the people that was actually part of, people that actually done it. That was a crucial moment in my life. And I never get my mom like, baby, you need to tell the truth. You need to tell the truth. And I'm like, Mom, they're my partners. They gonna tell the truth. Baby, you need to tell, man. Them boys ain't finna. I told you about this long time. I told you gonna get yourself in something that you ain't gonna be able to get yourself out of. I'm like, Mom, these my partners. They gonna tell the truth. Of course, doing 15 years, obviously somebody didn't tell the truth. But what was sad was, as we talk about a broken system, not being able to afford an attorney, and even the judge felt like it was something wrong with my case. But the DA didn't want to give up. He wanted a conviction. But let me step back a little bit. What was crazy, I'm only 18 years old, never really been in a system other than juvenile. I'll never forget the detective threatened my life as he wrote the statement and forced me to sign a statement. At that time in my life, I thought what they were doing was right. I didn't know no better. Even though I knew some of their statement was fabricated and they were true, but they had to write it into to make the story seem fit to how they wanted the case to look. So I ended up having to plea out for an 18-year sentence for a murder I didn't do, armed robberies I did choose. But I ended up doing 15 years in prison. And like you said, as I went down to prison, I went to one of the worst prisons you can go to here in Georgia. It was called Alto at the time. If anybody know anything about Georgia, at the time there was a prison called the Arendelle State Prison, which was called Alto. It was like one of the worst prisons you can go to as a young man. Of course, you're going down there, good hair, 150 pounds, somewhat bright skin. That's not an easy path for any young brother, man. And I'll tell you, man, it was a challenge, man, go down there because you have to conform to that prison life. And I watched a lot of things happen. I watched a lot of young men get raped. I watched a lot of young men, get their head busted. A lot of young men get stabbed. It make you turn into a brutal type person. The most important thing that happened to me, though, while I was incarcerated, when I first got locked up, was I got saved. And when I got saved, it began to change the way I think, and it made me look at life a lot different. And it definitely changed the course of my life while I was in prison, and it definitely helped me secure a place in my life while I was in prison. And that's what made me not conform to the prison life, even though to some degree you get a little institutionalized, regardless of how you try to live your life. So, long story short, I am doing 15 years in prison for all those charges, and I got out 2007.
So thank you very much, Omar. And just listening to everyone's stories, I see themes of issues of trust and issues of abuse and poverty and wrongful conviction and coerced confessions and just impact of life. And it just reminds me, I always like to make these comparisons, international and domestic comparisons, and just permit me to just make this one, if I may. The international definition on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide is killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group, deliberately inflicting upon the group conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction in whole or in part. That is really what the international definition of genocide is. And when we look at what we talk about in terms of incarceration and in terms of trauma, in terms of the intergenerational impact, it's not too far-fetched, in my humble opinion, to use some of these international definitions as part of our advocacy in the U.S. So we're going to move right now to life post-incarceration. And all of you all are leaders in the criminal justice field. And I want you to talk just a little bit about just how your experience is impacting what you're doing today, exactly what you are doing today, and anything else you might want to share. And I want to go in and I'll start with my sister, Susan Burton.
Thank you both for opening and sharing the realities. Thank you both. I reached a place where I realized everything had failed me, and I had to admit I had failed me too, and I'd ended up in this caught up in this cycle of destruction. So October 4th, 1997 is my sobriety date. I was luckily found this place in Santa Monica, a couple of blocks from the beach, that allowed me to enter there after 6 prison commitments. And I went there and I got the resources I needed to be able to get on the path of healing. But the other thing that I noticed in that community is that them folks didn't go to jail for what we went to jail for in South LA. And they had a huge buffet, what I want to call a buffet of social services, from medical, dental, mental health, therapy, clothing, recovery meetings with carrots and celery, and tea and coffee, and they just had a huge opportunity to rebound and recover from whatever life threw them. And I began to say, why isn't this in South LA? We need it too. So after observing that, and then understanding the role of race, class, and capitalism in our country, like, this ain't right. Why didn't somebody invest a court card in me? Why didn't I get a piece of paper to go to an AA meeting and say, you can get better here? I got chains, stripped of my dignity, and sent off to prison, but I had this reprieve of 100 days in this recovery place that allowed me to get stronger and understand there was something different. And I emerged from that place and got a job, saved my money, and got a house, and tried to replicate what I had experienced in Santa Monica by the beach. Although I was in South LA by the railroad tracks, what the hell? It was still a home with a safe place that women could land, come back into the community, and begin to get their lives back on track. So that was 20 years ago. To date, over 1,000. The houses have multiplied from 1 to 2, and now it's at 7. An organization came last month, and asked if we would merge with them and take them over because they was property rich but cash poor. And if we could implement our model there, and the first thing I did was terminate the contract with Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation because we don't work for them. We're not going to we're not going to do their bidding. But what I learned, there was something different, and that difference I wanted to bring to the community. And what my goal has, expanded. We've helped over 1,000 women come back to the community. We brought over 300 children back with their moms, and we are teaching women to organize, to be leaders in the community, to challenge the status quo, and just trying to ripple that out. But the other part that I'm emerging on with the publishing of the book, I've been going to prisons all across the nation. So far, I went to 22 states doing book talks with women and offering them the book. I actually printed a paperback version of the book, and I'm offering it to women, and intentionally going to let them know that we have to, there's life after incarceration, but we have to fight. And I just want to read to you the letter in this book, and that I put in the book, and let you know that if there is a person incarcerated or a facility that this book can go into, that you can go to becomingmissburton.com, and there's a drop down, and you can order that book for anyone who's inside, and we'll ship it to them. So in the beginning of the book, there's a letter that reads, "Dear friend, for many, many years I was caught in America's prison system. I often wondered as I lay in my cell at night if I would ever break free and if my life would ever change. For too long, it seemed it never would. Each time I was released, I struggled to find a better path for myself to break the cycle of misery and incarceration. But then I would find myself back in prison once more. I wrote this book to tell a story of my journey not only to freedom, but also to passion and purpose. I hope my story will help you realize how truly valuable your life is and inspire you to think about how you can create a life after prison that is full of meaning and dignity. I want you to know that there are no throwaway people. Your life matters. The final time I was released from prison, I was at last able to get the help that I needed to begin to put my life together. I now know that most incarcerated people, especially women, are survivors, not only of poverty, but also of violence and abuse. With help, I was able to understand this and begin to forgive myself for some of the choices, disappointment, and hurts. Importantly, I also began to understand the larger forces that affected me and my entire family. And this awareness, in turn, led to my political awakening, which grounds and sustains me to this day. Whatever our personal stories may be, we must all be willing to fight for the right to be the best that we can be. I know it's not easy, but I also know from the many ups and downs of my own life that it can be done. I know it's possible to fight for yourself, to love yourself, and to find a way up and out. I pray and hope that you enjoy my book, that it helps you imagine and ultimately achieve a new and different life for yourself. And I invite you to join me in the nationwide struggle for the full restoration of the civil and human rights of all formerly incarcerated people. And I'm rooting for you with all of my heart. Sincerely, Miss Burton. So, I printed 11,000 of these books, and I'm down to about a little under 2,000 now. Wow. So I'm still just traveling the country, and I'm offering the book, and the responses that I get from women is they say, "Me too. Your story is my story." And clearly from the 1,000 women who've been through a new way of life, the reality is that poor women, poor Black and brown women, their trauma, their experience has been criminalized, or let me say their response to the trauma and violence that they experience has been criminalized in this country. And we just have to do something different and better.
So thank you very much, Susan. Let's give her another big hand. I had the honor of visiting one of Susan's houses, I think the main house, personally, along with a group of people several years ago, and the experience was truly transformational, not just from someone from the outside looking in, but for the women who were there, their lives were absolutely a change. And everywhere we went around LA, no matter who it was, from the highest ranked whoever to the person who just got out of prison, they were all talking about Miss Burton, Miss Burton, Miss Burton, Susan Burton this, Susan Burton that. The respect that I saw that you engendered as a result of your work has been, truly inspirational. So I just wanted to just say thank you for that. So Anthony, talk to us about life post-incarceration. You are a leader in the criminal justice field. How did you get there?
Wow, it was quite a journey. I never thought I would end up here talking about criminal justice reform. Number one, I wasn't a criminal. It didn't really affect me, so I just thought the law was the law, and that's how we live, right? And then I got a knock on my door, changed my whole life. And when I was sentenced to death, I never received a letter from any one of you guys. Asked me how I was doing. All my mail came from overseas. Germany, France, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden. All these people was writing to me, say, hey, I just want you to know that we love you no matter what. Somebody do care for you. And that was all good, but I'm innocent. And all I heard on TV over here was I was guilty. And people were responding like that, even though there was no evidence to say I was guilty. That was the response of the public. So I decided that, while I'm here, I see so many people getting executed. Mentally ill, guilty, not guilty, should have had a lesser included offense, a lesser charge, but they're on death row because they didn't have good legal representation. All this madness, and everybody was getting killed. Like I said, I seen 413 people get executed. Most of them I knew. All of them I knew. A lot of them was my friends that I got to know. So I decided that if these people are gonna take my life for something that I didn't do, then I'm gonna let the whole world know what they're doing. So from that, I started reaching out to all my friends across seas, and I started an organization called Join Hands for Justice. From behind those walls, I was sitting right on death row, mobilizing people across the globe to be a voice for my fight. And that's what happened. So from behind those walls, I started this organization in France called Join Hands for Justice that reached to China, that reached to Switzerland, that reached to Germany, Sweden, right? And then because of what they were doing, America heard my story. Isn't that funny? My story came from across seas, right? And that started my path toward regaining my freedom. So I looked at that and said, wow, I'm sitting behind here and I'm mobilizing the world. Imagine what I can do if I'm out there, right? So I felt very encouraged after seeing that all I had to do was sit there and write some things on paper, send it out, and the response I was getting was like, okay, this can work. So when I got out, I started working as a detective. I worked for Texas Defender Service as a detective. And while I was there, an attorney called me and said, hey, we got this case on death row down there that we think this man is innocent, but he's run out of his appeals. And if we can't get his alibi witness to come forward, they're gonna execute him. We've tried to talk to his alibi witness for the last 4 or 5 years, and all she's done is slam the door in our face, cursed us out, didn't want to have anything to do with us. And we want to know if you will be willing to go down there and see if she'll talk to you, because it's our last hope. I said, okay, I'll go and talk to her. So we drive down, and I'm with the other investigator who the lady been cursing out all this time. So when we get to the lady's apartment, and we knock on the door, her daughter answers. And as soon as she answered, I asked her, is your mom home? And she looked at the other investigator, because they've been cursing her out for 4 years. And then she looked toward her mom, and I knew she was looking at her mom. And then all of a sudden, her mom come up to the door, and she seen the investigator, and she just started going up, what did I tell you? I don't want. I said, listen, man, hold on. Let me just tell you who I am. And if you don't want to talk after that, I will leave you alone. So I told her about my story, and she had just seen it all on television, because I hadn't been out for about 6 months. And at that, she let her guard down. We went into her house, and for 2 hours, this woman told us everything that eventually led to this man's exoneration. Okay? So I was very instrumental in getting the next death row inmate freed. Okay? So I'm thinking, oh, I'm on a roll now. Okay? I come out and I made this happen. And I'm on a prison radio show as a co-host talking to the prisoners in prison, telling them keep your head up, things like that. All right? And then I eventually became a board member of the Houston Forensic Science Center, which I am today. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because of DNA, how important it is in our cases today, right? But DNA can free you, it can convict you, right? But what you want is you just want fair play. And our crime labs across the country is not giving us fair play, right? They in the bed with the DA's office. So they always give us fact findings most favorable to the DA. So I said, well, I'm gonna be on this board because I'm gonna make sure you guys are dotting the I's and crossing T's and getting this thing right, okay? So I took this position just for that, to make sure that when DNA come in and they're testing it, that they're a neutral party, that they are a scientist, that they are not a witness for the state, but they are a neutral party in this here. And because of that, we have the best crime lab in the country now, independent crime lab in the country, okay? So then, I'm on the road. I started my own organization because I'm feeling it now, Anthony Graves Foundation. And the first thing I did was start a program at South Texas College called HIP, H-I-P, Humane Investigation Project. Because we always focus on the attorneys and we talk about what the attorneys didn't do and how they wasn't prepared. But I witnessed the downfall of me was that the lack of investigation. All the evidence was out there. All I needed was an investigator to go out there and find it. I never even met an investigator. When I was going to trial after 2.5 years of being arrested, a man was sitting on the front row and I asked my attorney, who is that? She said, you don't know who that is? I said, no. She said, that's your investigator. I've been here 2.5 years, never met him. What did he investigate? But he was getting paid by the court. So I started this program called HIP because I wanted to focus on the investigation aspect of cases. You know, it was evidence that was unearthed that led to my exoneration. If I had an investigator from the beginning who would have done his job, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this seat today. But I didn't have an investigator. So while attorneys are so very important in getting the case across the finish line, you need an investigator to build that case. And I think too many times we don't focus on the investigation part of it. We always talk about the lawyering. But the investigation is just as important. So I started that. And now we have about 4 or 5 cases that we're working with, right? Oh, but I ain't started. Hold on. Now, because of what I do, someone reached out to me from the ACLU and said, hey, you know, we have this new Smart Justice Initiative, and we would like for you to be a part of it, right? Fine. So I went to work for the ACLU for about 6 months as an employee and realized, I don't want to do that. I'll contract with you because I ain't working for nobody, all right? So we ended up doing a contract, and I work with them on the Smart Justice Initiative. And one of the things that I've done for them, I've created this program, and it's a speakers bureau. A speakers bureau for those who've been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. We need to hear their stories. I am so tired of scholars and lawyers telling my story, all right, that I said, you know what? I want to train people how to tell their own stories, right, so that it resonates more. So now, starting September the 15th, will be our first class. It's a 12-week program, an hour and a half a week, where we are teaching people how to articulate their stories. And we're teaching them entrepreneurship as well. And that's at Texas Southern University, along with the ACLU. So we're just starting that program. I'm very excited about it because I feel like we're going to actually lift the voices of those who've been directly impacted so that they can be heard.
Okay, Anthony?
Yes, ma'am?
You got a whole lot more?
I got just 2 more.
Okay.
You want me to stop?
I mean, you know, life after incarceration,
I
wow.
have been busy.
You have been.
But no, I mean, that wraps it up. I mean, other things are just that I have a TV show in the works now where I'm going to be actually solving cases on national television. So I'll end with that.
Let's give it up for Anthony Graves. Wow. All right, Omar Howard.
Yo.
Let's hear about your life post-incarceration.
Oh, he got a lot. I'm trying to, I just want a couple things. You know, I told y'all, the most important decision I ever made in my life, as I told you in the beginning, when I got saved. And it really began to change the way I looked at life and the way I, looked at people and the way I, moved throughout life. And while I was in prison, I got involved in, prison ministry and chaplaincy. And shortly while I was there, they asked me to help out with the mentoring program that they had at the prison. So I started working with the juveniles. And while I was working with these juveniles, my heart began to just get real tender because I was looking at young men. Now, I'm only 19, I'm only about 20, 21, 22 years old. And at the time, when Georgia passed some laws when they was charging the teens as adults, they was bringing 14, 15, 16-year-old kids down to one of the worst prisons you can be at, which I thought was just inhumane. Like, you're finna destroy these kids' lives. Because I witnessed, as soon as these kids turned 18, I witnessed these kids coming across the yard getting raped. You see what I'm saying? Because, prison have a savage life. And that's the reality of prison. That's one of the realities of prison. But when I watch some of these kids and as I begin to work with some of these kids, it's like I was looking at my sons. And I was like, man, these kids, man, they sending these babies down. And that's how I looked at some kids. These are babies y'all sending to prison, man. This ain't right. And so I started working with the mentor program and had a good success with it. Started, working with a lot of young men. And then they started bringing the schools in, and I started speaking in the schools. I'm speaking to the schools. They had a Scared Straight type program. But I didn't see what God was orchestrating in my life. And so throughout the prison, that's what I was doing, chaplaincy. I was doing ministry. I was doing Bible studies. I was doing speaking at the high schools, mentoring young men. And throughout my prison time, that's what I did. Eventually, 2003, they sent me to, which is called the Atlanta Transition Center. I finally got an opportunity to feel that I was going to be released from prison. And so when I got there, the parole board denied me for 3 more years. Of course, I'm just lost now because I thought I was going to be home with my sons. But when I got denied is when God really started opening up some doors. There was a program called Project Hill here that they started calling me out to come speak outside of the prison. So they had me going around Clayton County and different high schools, working with Department of Correction, Parole Board, and different stuff, doing speaking, talking about my life and how I can help encourage young people to do something different with their life. And so that's what I was doing for the last 3 years before I got out of prison. Then when I got out of prison, God really began to show me a different direction of my life and how he began to shape it all up. 2 years after I got out of prison, the chaplain died at the facility at Atlanta Transition Center, and I got a phone call one day, and a young lady by the name of Andrea Sheldon, who runs a program here called Heartbound Ministry, said, "How would you like to go back in prison as a chaplain?" And I looked at her and I said, "Man, I just got out of prison. I ain't trying to go back to no prison. I'm chilling right now. I'm enjoying life." Or at least I was trying to enjoy life. But it's amazing how God allowed you to go through things to develop your path. Just to step back one step, right when I got out of prison, Georgia passed some laws several years before that saying if there was a minor involved in your case while there was a commitment of certain crimes, armed robbery, aggravated assault, not aggravated assault, I think it was aggravated assault, or kidnapping, or false imprisonment. I had a false imprisonment charge. I didn't have a kidnapping charge. That you would have to register as a sex offender. So right when I got out of prison, they did make me register as a sex offender for a false imprisonment charge. And I never forget telling the parole officer, like, "Yo, man, you might need to look back through my case, man. I ain't got no sex offender charge, man." And so there was a big controversy going on because nobody really understood the law. And so when I got out, they had me registered as a sex offender. So of course, technically they supposed to have stopped me from speaking in schools. But people seen the fact that I didn't have a sex offender case, and they still allowed me to speak in a lot of different places. 2009, the case did get overturned. Southern Center for Human Rights took on my case and with some other people's case, and they began to help change some laws. Eventually, December 6th, or December, I supposed to went to court December 4th. They called me December 3rd, said I had been taken off the sex offense registry list. And of course, when Andrew asked me to go back inside the prison, I actually didn't think that was going to happen because I was still on parole. When we went and asked the warden said that was the best thing he ever heard, is to bring somebody back inside the prison that can relate with the guys and that has been through that system. So January 1st, 2010, which never been done in the state of Georgia, is to bring somebody back in who's still on parole, who just paroled out this place a couple years before. So I was offered the opportunity to come back in as a chaplain, which was unheard of, but that's how God began to create something in my life, and that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years as a chaplain at the Transition Center. About a year and a half after that, as I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements, speaking on different panels in all schools across, state of Georgia, I started thinking about mentoring. And I remember mentoring while I was in prison, and a couple people asking me to mentor their kids. And I said, man, I remember when I was in Alabama, my grandmother put me in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. And I was sitting there thinking one day, sitting in my apartment, and of course, an apartment that I can get because I got a background, so my mother had to put in her name. And I said, man, my young brothers need to see a positive black face. And so I came up with my own mentoring program, which is called Freedom is a Choice, which is geared toward encouraging our youth to choose freedom over incarceration. I thought it was important to do that because, and the reason why I named it Freedom is a Choice, because there's a reality here. As broken as the system is, I also believe that we also have to make better choices. When I looked over my life, and even though the detectives played a negative role, even though the DA played a negative role, I made a choice to pick up a gun. I made a choice to kick in some doors and rob some people. I made a choice to pistol whip some people. I made a choice to be in some shootouts. I made a choice to be disrespectful to authority. I had a choice that I could have made that took me into a different direction. I had some warning signs. If I'd have just made some changes, I wouldn't have went down that road. And so I learned that throughout the system, and I learned when I got out, man, that we, especially our young brothers, man, knowing how broken this system is, we got to make some better choices in life. Because in my fight to speak to our young people, and when I'm out speaking in schools, when you know the system is broken, you got to stay out of it. Because some of the stuff that a lot of us are doing, young brothers and sisters, we can't even afford a lawyer. Most of our young brothers that's out here committing some of these harsh crimes, they can't even afford an attorney. And as a young brother who have taken a single mother through all the things that I took my mother through, and when I have to watch that every day, and I tell people I go back inside of juveniles and prisons all the time. And when mothers are calling me constantly trying to figure out a way of plan how to get their child out of, how to talk to their child, man, I'm tired of seeing my black mothers cry. I'm tired of seeing the pain and the hurt. I'm tired of seeing when parents can't even get somebody to get them $100 just to get a lawyer to come talk to them, give them some advice. I see it every day. And I want to encourage my young brothers to do something better in their life. So that's what freedom is, that's what I've done at Freedom is a Choice, man, is to encourage our youth to choose freedom over incarceration. And it's been very successful the last 7-8 years. And I wasn't in it about data and all that stuff. I just want to be a servant to my young brothers and sisters, man. I want to be a servant. Real quickly, and I came out with the Omar Howard story, and just to tell you briefly, man, my name, and as it's going to be revised, it's all in the name. 2015, January 1st, right after the fireworks went off, I was trying to finish up my book, and as I was Googling my name, and my name, Omar, means long-lived, eloquent, and gifted speaker. And I'll never forget, as soon as I read that last word, man, I could not stop crying. And I remember texting a few of my friends. I said, man, it didn't matter what path I went in life. God, you already had a plan designed for me. My middle name means peaceful one, and firstborn, which I am the firstborn, and I try to make peace in a lot of situations. And then my last name, Howard, means watchman. And I watch over my young brothers, man. I push my young brothers. And when I began to finish up my book, and I finished up my book right before I went on the Yana Van Zant show, Fix My Life, because I wanted my story I just wanted to highlight some things in my life, hoping that some young brothers and sisters would grab their attention and wake them up. And I've gotten so many great response from so many young brothers and sisters, man, about how they was able to identify with some of the choices, because all I could do is be real with them. I made some bad choices. All right? Did I do the murder? No, I didn't. But you know what I should have been doing is taking my butt to school, obeying my parents, fulfilling those dreams that I wanted, man. I really wanted to play basketball. I really wanted to go to college. No, I wasn't on this platform. I got, charged for something I didn't do. But I did do some things, and that's what I do on a daily basis, man. Try to encourage my young brothers to choose freedom over incarceration.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the whole panel. We want to leave a few minutes for some Q&A. So as you're coming up to the microphone, I just want to say, who other than Angela and Frazier could get people's butts out of their beds at 8 o'clock in the morning to have just about a full room talking about these very critical issues? So I really want to thank Angela Frazier for her pivotal, Angela Frazier Giles. I'm sorry, Mike. There he goes. Give it up for Mike Giles over there.
Yeah.
Angela Frazier Giles.
You know, I need to thank Angela too, because she really worked with me to get me here. Right. And, you know, you went, you know, that extra. And I want to say thank you for that. I'm really enjoying being here and helping to get, you know, my protege, next wave of leadership here too.
Yes, indeed, and we're so very glad that you could join us as well. And I know that there are other impacted people with books out. I know Sean Hopwood and Lawman from robbing banks to going to college or something like that, and Tracy Syfax from the board. From the block to the boardroom. And I know that there are people out there with stories that are about to come out, like Jason Hernandez and his clemency issues. And there are folk who, I don't know what Dr. Divine Pryor went to, but there should be a book in some kind of way within there. Okay, we have my brother right there with the book up there. Yes, thank you so much. And Desmond, I'm looking for a book from you, LaTanya, you know, takes. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, Teresa Hodge, you know, I don't know everybody's names. And I even got a book in me that's on the drawing board. I can't seem to get off the drawing board because I'm busy. But I mean, I'm just saying, it's very important that we tell our stories, and I want to thank you. So, do we only have one question? Well, come, I need to see how many we have. So come on up, because our time, this is the way we're going to roll with this. Because, you know, we have to finish tonight. We're going to, I hope you have a pencil and piece of paper there. We want to hear all the questions together. Then I want you all to jot down what you want to respond to, and that'll be part of your closing as you're responding to the thrust of the questions you want to respond to. Does that sound good? Because we have about 7 minutes. So introduce yourself and give your question.
Okay. I'm Vicki Henry, and I'm the president of Women Against Registry. We advocate for the families who have loved ones on the sex offender registry, 904,000 men, women, and children. And so I have to say that I'm very impressed with all of you people, because you found a way to come back in the system and make a difference.
Amen.
So I'm very impressed with that, and I don't hand out things like that very often.
Thank you.
Awesome.
If you know me, you know.
Thank you.
But anyway, so my question is, as you know, our people, they're on a public registry. They have a very, very restricted life.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of fear for death, being shot, and that kind of thing. So anyway, my question to you is, how, in your opinions, how do we get our people to get to that place, because that's what we're trying to do, get to that place where they will come back and work as hard as you do.
Thank you very much. Next question.
My name is Randy Kearse. I want to say thank you for having the panel here. It's very inspiring. When I was incarcerated, one of the things that kept me going and inspired me is hearing stories of people who have shared that same experience as I did and came through the other end and were able to make it a successful transition back into society. I wrote a book called Changing Your Game Plan, How I Used Incarceration as a Stepping Stone for Success. So my question to you is, how difficult has it been, or is it, to get your literature back inside the prisons to be able to inspire those who are in the system in preparation for coming out? Because I traveled the country trying to get decision makers to be able to use our kind of material as a part of that reentry process of getting people to change the way they think.
So,
how
Mr.
hard
Kearse,
is it?
great.
How hard has it been?
We got it down. I just want to get all the questions that they can respond. Great question.
Hi, Roberta
My
Myers
sister,
at
Tony.
Legal Action Center, Tony. My question is about the registry issue, Omar, that you brought up. Bruce Riley from Voice of the Experience in Louisiana had put on a listserv that in Kansas, and I'm sure it's in a lot of other states, that, like you said, they're creating these registries. It's not just sex offenders, but making these violent case registries, and they're marrying them together and causing, it's a new form of labeling our folks. And does anybody know about any advocacy being done? I was just
Tony,
made
great.
aware.
We got 2 minutes. So I want to get through. Thank you. Y'all got that down?
Yeah.
Last 2 real quick, my brother.
Troy Williams, my question is about your writing process. Since we got this invitation for all of us to write books, I'd like to know, what is your process? What was your guys' process for writing your book?
Okay, and last question very quickly.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Hicks with the Offender Alumni Association of Birmingham, Alabama. My question is, in Birmingham, we have a gap in reentry housing for women. And I wanted to know, Ms. Burton, how you got started and some of the things that you had to do in order to get that done.
Great. We have 3 minutes. 1 minute each. Respond to how you want to respond. Well, do we have more time, Angeline? We have 5 minutes.
All right,
Good.
okay.
Whatever.
All right.
Rock and roll.
So, there was a lot of shame that was put on people who were incarcerated, whether it was a drug conviction, whether it was what they call the violence offense or a sex offense. And so for people who have been labeled, they just need to stand up and start telling their stories. They need to have the courage and the wherewithal to be able to stand up and tell their stories. As far as they served their time. It's done. How do we get them back into the community to be productive as possible? And as far as the prison in reach, so when I wrote my book, I said the women, this would be so empowering if women could have it. What I did is my paperback the publisher has not did a paperback yet. So I did a paperback. I brought someone on staff to call and locate every prison in the United States. And I began to reach out to those prisons with the paperback, with a letter, and wait for responses. Some prisons I already knew, but I organized a way for me to actually get in those prisons, travel to those prisons, ship books prior to me coming, because I wanted to be able to have a conversation with the women, and so that's how I did with the prison book. So the writing process for me was really, really, really hard. By the time I finished writing my book, I had to go back into therapy, and I'm still in therapy. I thought many of the stuff that I experienced and that I went through, that I was healed and it was gone. And when I got through writing the book, I sat in this big ball of sadness and pain that was just on me. So it was a real hard process for me. But it's okay. I'm here today. So,
and the panelists will be available afterwards, and you can address the reentry for women afterwards.
We always have our books out there.
The books are out there, exactly. It's all there. Let's go to Anthony Graves.
Yes.
Yeah, the writing process for me was very therapeutic. All right, it allowed me to release, and I would love to wake up in the middle of the night around 2 or 3 and write, when it was just very quiet. It was just me and my thoughts. It's very therapeutic for me because I could actually go sit on my bunk on death row and talk about what was going on in my life at that time. So, and I tried therapy afterwards, but I tried it one time and I decided it wasn't for me because she cried more than I did. She used up all the tissue, so I said, I'm not coming back here. She used up all the tissue, so I said, you owe me. Right? And then I took that to the stage, right? And so now I'm here using you guys as my therapist. So, yeah.
Okay, Omar.
Quick question. I mean, not quick question. What I'm talking about. The writing part, it was hard. It was tough because I went through my writer's block. I couldn't write a word for like 2 years. But somebody told me specifically, like, Omar, you're being selfish because you got a lot of young men out here, young ladies that need to hear your story, and you talk about it. So let this be your new business card, and you need to get on it. And I got on it and finished it up. This book is also being revised because January 24th, I just received a pardon for all my charges. So I'm thank God for that. Yeah, just showing how great God is. The sex offender, man, it is a tough. That is another animal. That's another beast. I thank God that I'm not on it no more. I really haven't kept up with the new policies or whatever, but the Southern Civil Human Rights helped me out. I think the Georgia Justice Project is a great avenue to go. That's here in Georgia now. But it is a tough, let me tell you, but I thank God for allowing me to go through all of it because I kept questioning God, like, why me, God? Why do you keep letting me go through all this mess? You let me go through being without a father. You let me go through with, you know what I'm saying, prison and time for something I didn't do. But then the people that he's putting me in front of now, people who's on sex offenders, people who don't have fathers, people who has been charged for stuff they haven't done. So these things have allowed me to do some other things, to be compassionate. And one thing, like I said in my book, and working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, man, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, working with Mothers Against Gang Violence, collaborating, that's how this book has really been developed. And the last thing I'm saying, I started a program called Great Readers Become Great Leaders. And that's how I'm getting my book inside of the juveniles. And I'm also revising, putting a questionnaire in back because I want kids to utilize the book and for their own personal self to identify some of the things they're doing and to try to get in schools as well. That's what I was told to do as far as that. So, hey, I'm having a great time right now. So the book's out there. I know y'all get to read it, man. I'm excited.
She didn't get a question out.
About the sex offender? I didn't. Okay.
Talked about the reentry home. I'm doing a national replication of safe houses, and this is something that's being launched in 2019. I'm training people to do what I do. I'm raising resources to help them to do what I do. So that's about, we need more places for women to land. That's it.
Let's give our panelists a big hand. The book's out.